Hey, I put that message I did yesterday private, and the reason is because I was reading a transcript, and I didn't realize that if you're not looking at the screen, you don't know where the transcript stops and I start. So I listened to the message back, and it didn't make sense because I wasn't looking at the screen. So I listened to it last night. I'm like, no wonder this one's not really getting any traction. It's confusing. So I just put it on private. I'm sorry about that. I know people hate when I do that because I'll be in the middle of a message and it'll just disappear. The point is, though, that these pastors take the words of freedom and turn them into a burden. They just flip it upside down. And I am crucified with God. I, through the law, died to the law, that I might live unto God. I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not frustrate the grace of God, because if righteousness were to come through the law, Christ died in vain. I wanted to see how they handled that verse, and sure enough, it was this traditional way, and it was a mess. What they say is that being crucified with Christ means that you understand that you're not supposed to live selfishly anymore. And I'm crucified with Christ, and Christ is in me. I no longer live, nevertheless I live, yet Christ in me is actually just a new burden to live for him. And it is motivated by the fact that he loved me and gave himself for me. So for them, what Paul is saying, in their view, is I no longer live for my hopes and dreams. I have the opportunity to serve God. And I remember every day why I'm saying no to my hopes and dreams and living this miserable life of serving God. It's because he loved me and gave himself for me, and it's the least I could do. So it's all watered down to become an emotional appeal to your conscience, not a reality. I wasn't really crucified with Christ. That just means he died for sins. I'm still here, but I'm not living for myself. I'm living for him. And with the same flesh that I used to pursue hopes and dreams, I now pursue serving him. And that's why they become evil workers. Because they become enemies of the cross. They do not see that they died with Christ. They don't believe that. And they don't believe that Christ actually lives in them and he gave himself for them to be their life. And they don't see that dying to the law means dying to all burden. Namely, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, which the law demands that you never did. And that's why you're a transgressor. And also from condemnation that comes from being a transgressor. The death of Christ liberated me from both because I died to the law. I literally died to the burden. Now they say that the law there is just the ceremonial law, circumcision, and all the different things of Judaism. But Gentiles were never under that law, so how could we die to it? No. The problematic part of the law is the moral. The Pharisees were good at keeping the ceremonial. They could even keep it blamelessly. But when it came to the moral, thou shalt not covet, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, all of us are on equal playing field, and all of us are condemned. And the reason we're condemned is not because God is giving you an F for not doing it. It's because man fell from the original intention, fell from the glory of God, and has been corrupted and damaged beyond repair, and God has to recreate us. And the law was just given to illustrate that he hadn't changed his mind. To remind those who were entering into the land, hey, yes, this is an inheritance, but it's for the seed to whom it was promised, which is Christ. You're not prepared to occupy this land. You're not the right kind of people. You're going to have to be recreated. The law should tell you that. The law that says thou shalt not covet says you coveted. And if you break it at one point, you've broken the whole thing. And it's not a matter of just we didn't keep it perfectly. These pastors say, well, you didn't keep the law perfectly, so Jesus died for you. He kept the law in your place, which is not true. And he died for you to make up for the difference in your performance. No, he died for us in order to give himself to us as life, because God's intention in the beginning was that man would eat of the tree of life. And we didn't. We were created in his image and likeness, but God's intention was that there would be another life that would come unto us, which is Christ himself, because we were to be an inheritance for Christ, to express him and be members of him, be his body, be his actual expression, bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. But without the life, we don't have that. And the whole point of Galatians, the whole point, the teaching all the way through, is that we've received the Spirit, who is the blessing, not so that we would be burdened with another demand to serve God, but so that the life of Christ would be in us in order to produce his fruit. And this is not by effort of the flesh or a burden on you or a work that's required of you, nor do you have to earn it. It's a free gift. And as the way we live under the supply of this gift and enjoy it is to acknowledge it, which is called the hearing of faith, because the gift is announced in the gospel and is flowing in the gospel. So did you receive the Spirit by the hearing of faith, or the works of the law? Means how does the Spirit get supplied? Well, it's by hearing what God has said and believing it. And what he has said is that he has supplied Christ to be your life. And we're to live by believing this is true, while also believing that we died to all demand and we couldn't produce the demand anyway, and to stop trying to produce it. And this is the faith of Abraham, because Romans 4 says that he counted his own body as though dead, and the barrenness of Sarah's womb. So that's one kind of reckoning of the deadness of the flesh. But gave glory to God, who calls life to the dead, and calls those things that are, gives life to the dead, calls those things that are not as though they are. And he grew strong in faith, counting that he would perform what he had promised. So we live like Abraham by faith, not by sight. And when it comes to what we consider about ourselves, we say, I'm dead, I can't produce it. I'm not going to produce Isaac. I can't. The best I could do is go into Hagar and produce Ishmael, which Paul says in Galatians 4 is a picture of going to the law for righteousness and trying to perfect the flesh. You're trying to produce what only God can produce, which is the life of Christ in you. So how can that come? Well, God said, I will visit you in the time of life, and Sarah will bear a seed that will come out of your loins and out of her barren womb, and it'll be supernatural by resurrection. That's what Isaac represents. He's a picture of Christ as life in us, according to Galatians 4. And we wait on God to fulfill his promise, and sometimes all we've got is our dead flesh. Sometimes we go through seasons where we are required, in fact, most of our Christian life, we are required to live by faith in what he has said, not by what we see. And what he has said is that we are blessed, and that we have the blessing, and that we're free from the debt, and we don't have to work for it, and it's not a reward for our service, it is a gift. And that's what justification secures. So Romans 4 says, what is Abraham pertaining to the flesh found? If he was justified by works, he could glory, but not before God. And then it says that the reward is not reckoned as a wage or a debt for service, because then it would be by works, but it's of grace. And to him who works not, but believes on him that justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted to him as righteousness. And this is the faith of Abraham. What does that mean? I'm already blessed. I can't turn the reward into a wage paid for service or a debt due to me, nor can I work for it and give my service as a wage to earn it. I've got to receive it as a gift, and it's given to the ungodly who work not, but believe. And that's who we are. These pastors don't want to say that they're ungodly, and don't work and just believe, because then you would say, well, then why am I paying you to tell me what to do? So they'll never admit to that kind of interpretation, but that is the truth of the word, and it is the liberating truth of the gospel. I'm going to share some testimonies later today, I'm hoping, by the Lord's mercy, of people who are absolutely getting set free and revived in their Christian life because of the gospel. Why? Because the gospel supplies the Spirit. You get laser sharp focused on the grace of Christ, and under the hearing of it and in the communication of it, Christ is supplied as life. That's how it works. And these preachers preach law, not grace, and it's incoherent. They acknowledge with one side of their mouth that you're blessed and you receive the Spirit, but on the other side of their mouth say that you need to work in order to earn it as a wage, a reward, or a blessing from God. It's a mess. And I'm sorry, if they're effective evangelists to tell people they're going to heaven when they die, that's great. But even the concept of just going to heaven when you die sets people up so that when we talk about Christ as life, they have literally no idea what we're talking about. So the evangelical job in their mind, what they're doing is, which is their job, is actually undermining the gospel, the meat of the word, and the riches that are ours in the setup, in the very way they proclaim the gospel. Even though it's the true saving gospel, it really gets your eyes off of Jesus Christ and onto yourself from the get-go. And then once you get in the church, they want you to be perfected in the flesh. It's really terrible. The cross sets us free from the burden and the condemnation, and the life of Christ is the blessing of the gospel, the blessing of Abraham, the Spirit of the Son that dwells in us, and He is the Christian life. Literally. It's not just an emotional appeal to produce another demand so that you'll feel guilty and serve Him because you owe it to Him because He died for you. No, He died for you so that He could bring you into death, and He rose so that He could live in you. That's the point. And it's a free gift from start to finish. All right, take care.